Okay, we're working in Adobe Photoshop CC. We're going to look at doing selections, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the spot healing brush tool. So I'm going to go ahead and take this image right here, which is web image 1247 edit. Open it up inside Photoshop. First, let's look at this spot healing brush tool. It's right here, right above your paintbrush. You'll see there's a couple different here. You have healing brush tool, which is the old one. Spot healing brush tool is much better though. Patch tool, which is for large areas, and then their content aware removal tool. Let's actually look at that content aware move tool real quick. If I was to come in here and I wanted to move this, I could draw a circle around it. So you know what, I really want it right there. Commit to it, bam, it's right there. Same thing, I can move it over there. Pretty nifty, eh? And it works equally well with some complex backgrounds as long as they're not too bad. So let's look at spot healing brush. So what spot healing brush, a couple features that it has is it has content aware, has create texture and proximity match, and then sample all layers. So if sample all layers was unchecked and you were to come down excuse me, so I'm working this cold out. Then if I was to try to erase this here, it would obviously not work because I'm on a new layer and I don't have sample all layers checked. So let's turn that on. Let's make this a little bigger and let's just get rid of that. So it also works pretty good for like removing telephone lines or edges or whatever you have in your image. So let's look at this little piece of hair right here on her forehead. Make a small brush and we're just going to drag it across there. You don't have to be too exact. You could even get rid of her eyebrow if we wanted, but let's back up and try that one more time. Stay a little closer to the eye there. A little smaller brush. Stay a little further away from the eye. See what a difference that makes. Now I'm going to get rid of her nostril there. So nothing really practical in those two exercises, getting rid of her eyebrow, but we will leave that part with her hair. So we're just going to go ahead and flatten this by pressing Control-Shift-E. Alright, so this is what we got. So we've got this image of this young lady right here. Let's first look at some of the different things that are available in our select menu. So we have color range. We could come in here and say, you know what, let's just select black, which is our top. And then fuzziness is a matter of how sensitive it is. You see how it's right there, it's only going to pick things that are really, really black. This starts to expand into gray areas and so forth to look into the shades. So we're just going to go right there. Now what we can see is that selection. To show you what that selection is like, I'm going to press Control-J and watch what happens over here. You can see that that's what we've selected out of that. Okay, let's go up to that one again. Let's go up to color range, still on the black, and let's make it a little more fuzzy. Get more of her hair. You can see the marching ants there and see the better selection. So you can see that's a little bit better. With real colors, like maybe the color of her lips, let's go, you know, black is a color, I guess, but we can actually come out here and select it just there. And see if we wanted it to be a little more, we could go in there and change our fuzziness. So this one works pretty good for just basic colors. We could then come in here and choose a hue saturation layer and say we just want to pump the color up in the lips. And you can see what's happening there. You can also see that some of the other areas that we had selected are being affected, like up here by her eye and that type of stuff. Alright, so with all these selection tools that we look at now, I'm going to give them to you as they're really just a starting place for the most part. You still want to fine-tune all of your selections. I can't think of one of these tools that does, I mean, occasionally it'll get it pretty darn close or maybe even spot on. But for the most part, you use a selection tool to get a good start. So let's look at another option we have here. So select, and then let's select subject. So select subject is new as of I think December of 2017. And the select subject tool, what it'll do is it has a database, and it's an intelligent tool to know what subjects might be, such as people, animal, cars, buildings, that type of thing. So let's see what it does. It takes a minute sometimes. And look at that selection. To see what selection we really have, we could hit Control J to make a copy, and then we turn that off, and that did a pretty good job of selecting that, huh? You'll notice a couple parts that it kept. Look right there. Let's make it a little easier. I'm going to make a black background there in between, okay? So we can see what the selection's really like. And what I did is I just added a black piece of paper behind this selection. So you can see it didn't do too bad around the hair. This hair is pretty easy though. A little bit bumpy on the shoulder. Did pretty good here except for that little white spot right there. Did pretty good coming down the hips. See this bottom part here where the shadow was? It missed that. And it missed this part in her hand and then a little bit right there. But it got us pretty darn close. Okay, so select subject worked pretty darn good in this instance. So let's go to some of these other tools over here. This is where a lot of our selection tools are, is right here. So first we have the lasso tool. The lasso tool, you click on spots and then you just sort of drag it. Dang it. So it's just for a quick drag. So see, I'm just going to drag this around, or this would be for extracting something simply out. It's not for very fine, detailed work. The trick is you got to get them to join before it'll do it. And then when we hit Control J, you can see that we just have the simple background there. Alright, so let's back up one. So that's the lasso tool, just like its name implies, you just drag it around it. The polygonal lasso tool, this one's pretty good. You click on here, I'm going to click right there, and I see I'm going to drag it up. And every time I think that the shape is moving, right now I'm not holding down the mouse or anything, I just clicked it once. I'm going to come right here and I'm going to click it and put a control point. And then I can come up here where I think it's changing again, do another control point. And then maybe there. You know, this is an older tool. Each time you see that, I'm clicking. You know, but it's not really hugging the head. If I go across, it's just going to go across. So in the end, once you get these to join, then it's just going to be a selection. So I can spend my time tracing all the way around that, but I rarely use this one. I think it just doesn't work as well as it used to, but it does make nice straight edges when you're, if you're more sort of free forming. But if you're trying to cut some out, then I wouldn't use it. Magnetic lasso tool. This one is the polygonal lasso tool, but it's magnetic. So watch what happens here. I'm just going to click once here, and I'm just going to drag it up her arm. So you see all those little control points it's throwing down? Those little control points we can then go through and fine tune. So I'm not holding down the mouse, but I'm just dragging it along the edge. And I don't even have to be that exact about it. I'm going to drag it down pretty quickly here. If I need to, I can click it to give it a control point like I had to there. Let's go up there. I clicked it there, and I'm going to click it there too. Get back to there. I did a pretty darn good selection, huh? We can see how good of a selection it is by going into quick mask mode for a minute. You can see I didn't get that, but look at how look at everything else, how good it did around the edges there. That was a fairly easy selection to do. So that's the magnetic lasso tool, and I do recommend that one. That one's pretty slick. Okay, so let's go to these other two selection tools. So we have the quick selection tool. Now you see how this is still a selection active right here with the marching ants. I'm going to press Control D to deactivate that selection. Okay, so this quick selection tool, it just lets us drag areas. and it's actually pretty good too. You see, it's selected that whole area. I'm just clicking and dragging here, and then let's drag it down here. Look at what happened here. It selected her arm. Now, I'll come back to this in a minute, but one thing that I'll mention here as I'm dragging this, if I hold down Alt and then I drag right here on her arm, I can pretty much tell it, don't do her arm. I'm deselecting a portion. So now, since I've already done this part of the selection, to add to it, I have to hold down Shift. And so I click there, and you see it selected all that, and I can also select this, and this, and even that little section right there. Alright, let's see how that one looks. Looks pretty darn good, huh? So you still see it messed a little right there, and a couple little areas where it could be fine-tuned just a little bit. Let's go back out of quick mask mode. But anyways, the quick selection tool is pretty slick, actually. You know, we could even come here and say we wanted to just select her top. I just click there, and I could drag it up a little bit. That part I don't want, so I'm going to hold down Alt and try and get rid of that. Drag it over her hair. It's done pretty good. Alright, so press Control D to deselect it. So the next one here is the Magic Wand. The Magic Wand is actually pretty cool. So by default, it's 32. So the higher the number, the more sensitive it is. The lower the number, the less sensitive it is. So what the Magic Wand is it selects similarly colored images in the colors in the image and brightness. So if I click right here, it's probably going to select all of the white, but it'll get into a roadblock and it's not going to select those middle ones. So I clicked it there, you see it selected everything that was sort of white. So now I can come in here and I can hold down Shift, and I'm going to add to the selection right here. And I can push that up, press it right there. Try and clean it up. Now I'm going to push Shift and select in here, and select in here. So the main difference between this and the last one that we used is it's based upon the color and luminosity. So see, pretty good selection. It missed a little on the foot. We could go in there and try and clean that up a little bit before we do that. So again, I'm going to click right here, and you see how much it selected and how well it did there. What if I was to change this number to 40? I'm going to press Control D to deselect. I'm going to click again, and you see it's a little different. How about 80? You see it cleaned all the way up, but see, it didn't help out too much in here. It bled over on the slightness of her skin, so it made it more sensitive. What if I went to 10? See, it didn't even go all the way around like it did the first time. So again, the higher the number, the more sensitive it is. So we started out at 32, right? And it did pretty good. If we thought that what was happening down here, it needed to be less sensitive, we can now change this number. Even though we've already got our first selection, we say be less sensitive, right? So we're going to go down to 10. We're going to hold down Shift and add to this selection right here. So then we can drag it along the edge there. Hope that's making sense for you. You can see it didn't do super well on the edge of the toe there. So I'm going to hold down Alt and unselect that edge there. Try and bring that area up a little bit. Maybe not. Hold down Shift and add this part. We can kick it back up to 32, and you'll see how much different the tool behaves. You know, it's a lot more selective on what it's doing, or more sensitive. Alright, so let's zoom out. Go to quick mask mode for a minute. And you see it did pretty good. We didn't add those other parts in there. So this is a pretty good start for a selection right here. Let's zoom back out a little bit. And go back out of quick mask mode. And then press Control D to deselect. So let's look at this again real quick. Okay, so quick review of these. We have select. We have color range, focus area, subject, select a mask, and different things we can do with these. We can select everything. You see now how the marching ants are all the way around it. That means everything is selected. Again, to deselect, we're going to press Control D. And then we've got these two selection tools here. The lasso tool, just drag it, and that's your selection. You can see from quick mask. Polygonal lasso tool. So that we just draw selections, you know. And it's just going to keep everything to a solid line. And then we got our quick selection tool for dragging around objects and trying to select things. Then we got our magic wand tool. So the ones I think you'll use the most are probably magic wand from time to time, and then this magnetic lasso tool. And select subject is actually looking pretty darn good nowadays. So I'm thinking that that tool is just going to continue to improve. I've tried it on cars, I've tried it on wildlife, I've tried it on a lot of things. So let's see. So after we have a base selection here, let's go into quick mask mode here real quick. And you could access this anytime by pressing Q. So let's push Q on the keyboard. And so the thing about quick mask mode that's pretty cool is that you see everything that's red is not selected, and everything that's that is not red is selected. Okay. So if we wanted to come down here and clean up, then essentially all you do is you paint red and then you use the eraser tool. So the two things you're going to use to clean up with this tool is the paintbrush, and where you don't want the selection, you're going to paint red, and where you do want the selection, you're going to use the eraser tool. So let's make it a harder brush. And you guys are all expert painters here. So we're going to come in here and clean up that selection right there. You see actually this whole area right here, right? Then let's scroll along the bottom here. You see the foot right here, right? We now got to clean that up a little bit, so let's get the eraser tool. Let's keep it at a opacity at 100%. And come through here and bring a little of that back. Maybe we need a little bit harder brush, right? And if we went too far, we could either back up or we could just grab the red brush again and draw that in there. So we're painting our selection. This right here will be fairly easy. And if you ever want to see how you're doing, you can either press Q on the keyboard, go in and out of your quick mask mode, or you can just click again underneath the color swatch. Zoom out. Looks pretty good. So now if we were to do a selection here, we're going to press Ctrl J to extract our selection out of the background. Turn off the background, and let's put a black layer underneath this. We'll do that by making a new layer underneath layer 1, and then we're going to edit, fill, and then what color we're going to say foreground color, which is black, or we could just say black, right? And if you probably see me do it fast before, what I really did is if you hold down Alt and hit backspace, whatever your foreground color is, it'll fill in. Or if you hold down Control and backspace, it'll fill in the background color. You see my background color is white, right? If that was red, then when I hit Control backspace, it would actually be red. So Alt backspace is the foreground color, Control backspace is the background color, and it'll fill whatever is selected at that moment, which if it's an empty layer, then it's sort of selected by default, right? It's going to fill it. So let's see. It's not really too bad, but still it could be cleaned up a little bit. Depends on what you're doing with it. So what we could do now, let's get that little spot underneath her arm there. Actually, let's leave that alone. We'll work on more on the nether image. So we can now add a slight blur to this selection. So let's back up a couple. So now you can see our selection again. I just hit Ctrl-Alt-Z till I backed up. You see a little lumpy on the shoulder there. And go back to this. Let's go to the eraser here, bring that up a little bit. And where we think we've done the best we can, but we still want it to be a little better, like maybe in the hair. So the red is what's selected by default. So if we were to come up here and go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, what it's going to do is it's going to blur that red. So if I go extreme, you know, from no blur to a lot of blur. But you can see what's happening with it. It's cleaning up my edges, right? So you can look at this selection here in the preview here, and you can see as I push it, it's getting softer. So what the softness is doing is not softening the image, it's softening the selection. So now when I do it and get out of quick mask mode, my selection's in a little bit more. So I'm going to press Ctrl J, and now there's not such a hard edge on my selection. So if I was to try to push this into an image that needed a smoother selection, I would probably do something more similar to that. And doing selections is all, it's really very specific to how you're doing it. But even that, I would not even do my selection out like this. What I would do, as we've learned from the other classes, is first I'd make a copy of this layer, so I've got the background right. So I've got 2 copies of this image with that selection. Then I would just add a mask. And look at my mask when I click it right there. You can see my mask. Okay, so when and the reason why that is just like as I blurred a minute ago, I could also blur my mask and do the same thing. So let's make a layer in between there. Now I'm going to come up here to my mask, and I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I can say, you know what, I like what it did in the hair, which I don't. But then I could go in there and mask other areas, and go in there and clean up my edges again because I've got this mask here that I can work on. So masking is the way to go. I wouldn't normally just take direct selections out. And if I get it into the image I'm trying to blend it into, then I might even take a black paintbrush here, ran at a lower opacity, keep it soft, and then I can come in here and touch up the side. And see, obviously black's the wrong color, right? Because I'm trying to reveal. So I'm going to go back to that one right there. Actually, black is the right color. Let's go back to so let's see, so black because we want to hide the white. Something's up with my selection tool. Maybe I've got a selection going on, huh? Well, something's definitely wrong with that. Excuse me. Sometimes it can be a little buggy. Let's back up a couple. Let's get our selection. Get rid of both of those. Let's make a copy of our background, and then let's add a mask. And let's put that mask below it and fill it in. So, one interesting thing I wanted to show you here is you see that the mask that I did was it was a reveal all mask, which then kept my selection as that. So you remember Control I, and Control I is your friend. So I can just press Control I all the time, and my mask inverts, right? Even I can Control I this color, and it'll invert. Control I is your friend. Okay, so let's clean up that edge a little bit there. So I'm gonna come up here. Let's grab a black brush. Oh man, that's why I somehow hit that to divide. Dang it, it did exactly what I told it to do. So I can come in here and try and blend this in a little more. And probably do it at, let me back up a couple steps, because I would do this at a lower opacity if I'm trying to clean up around hair. A little right there. You know, and we added a blur to that mask, so it's no wonder it's like that. But I could easily come back in here and I could get a hard brush, kick it all the way up, and then I could bring that edges back, right? Because the mask is not just a selection, so I can start to clean up different areas that I needed to clean up. Bring that back there, I can say nope. You know, let's bring that up like that, and then let's switch back to this and go to there. Bang, that's a small brush, huh? Anyways, so background replacement or whatever you're trying to blend it in. I would do a mask and then take it into your new background, and then you just try to blend it in the best you can by softening those edges. If you don't do like a soft blur before that. And this still needs a lot of work on cleanup and stuff. Some backgrounds are easier to blend in. If she was shot against a white, or I'm sorry, a gray background or something that was more neutral, then I might just do like a soft light blend mode instead of that. Let's do one other thing real quick that I wanted to show you. So this is the selection tool. If you can see the mask right here. Sorry, it's not the selection tool, but if you hold down Control and you click on anything that looks like a selection, which is a mask, then it'll give you that selection. So it's giving me that selection back, right? So I can come up here into Select and I can save as. And I can call it a, what do we call it? Yoga pose select. Alright, so later on, I can delete this, I can do whatever I want with it later on, and maybe I'm coming in here and I'm making this a black and white. Maybe that's just crazy color, right? Let's drop the saturation down a bit. Okay, and then we can come back later and say, you know what, I don't want these to affect that. Let's get rid of this one for a minute. I'll get rid of that whole color balance one. Actually, let's not use color. Let's use brightness, okay? So come over here. Brightness, I'm going to drop it way down, right? Go with that for a minute. So I can come back up here to my selection, say load selection, and the selection is attached to the image. So which one? The yoga pose. Now I've got the selection. Now I can press Alt backspace to fill my selection with black, because black is the foreground color. So that selection is available to me whenever I need it, at any time, because I've saved that selection. So it's saved with your document. So as long as you save it as a Photoshop document, it'll always be there. So to be able to grab selections that you have and save them, or even to, as you're working on the image later on, you might have to keep going back in and adding different layers. So you might go through and hold down Control and then click it. And you'll notice that, look at the selection. The outside is selected. So what is really selected? What's selected is what's white. I'll show you. I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to press Control J. Now you'll see that that's not the middle part that's selected, right? It's everything else. And we could tell that because it had this outside selection. Now you remember how I said Control I gives you, inverts whatever it is. If you press Control Shift I, or Command Shift I for Apple, then what it'll do is it'll invert your selection. Let's do that. Now you'll see that she's selected, not everything else. Let's back up when you see this marching ants right here. Press Control Shift I. Now I've got just her selected, and I'll show you, because when I go into that, now it's her that's selected, not the background like we had on that first one. Alright, let's close this image. Okay, let's go to Excuse me. Let's go to this image right here. Let's try a couple of quick selection tools and see what we can do. So we're going to come in here and go select, how about subject? You know what, that did pretty darn good. Look at how well it did it. Right up her edges there. Even the hair, look at what it did. It left a couple strands out, but maybe we're okay with that. And even those stragglies. So let's press Ctrl J. And let's see what that looks like. Let's add a layer in between this and make it black. That's a pretty clean selection. Even though you can see it's a little jacked up here and a little right there. After you got this as a mask into another image, that's when I would start cleaning that up. So to make the mask, remember we're going to take a copy of the background, because it's the whole thing, and then we're going to add a mask to it. So currently it's that. And then when we went to clean this stuff up later, we would use, you know, in this case we'd paint black or white. So we're going to paint black to, you know, we can clean up some of these edges of these hairs and whatnot. But I would wait until you have it into whatever image you're going to composite it with. But maybe that's not our goal with this selection. Is maybe we want to select everything that's not her and add that, make that background darker so she pops a little bit more. So I'm going to press Control and hit the mask, and you see it selected her. So I just said I wanted to darken everything else, not her, right? So let's press Control Shift I, or Command Shift I, and you see now everything that's not selected as her, or everything but her is selected. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a brightness contrast layer. Actually, let's go to curves. And then I'm going to choose the preset of darker. Right? It's pretty slick. And then let's add maybe a slight blur to this mask to clean up the edges a little bit. I don't think it's bad, but we're going to add just a slight blur to it. Because since we're just doing darkness, it's not a real hard selection like I was compositing images. And if I wanted to make it darker again, I could either double click to go back into my tool and just drag it down and make it even darker. I could also just press Ctrl J and it'll make another layer with that curves adjustment. You see it get progressively darker each time. See what's happening? It's just duplicate it. I'm going to press Ctrl Z to back up a couple. That's an easy shortcut. And if I say, well, I want it somewhere between, maybe I back it off a little bit. And want to see the before, after. But pretty slick and easy to do that, right? You could even take this selection, and now you can say, you know what, I want a duplicate of that. So let's flatten this for a minute. So I'm going to make a duplicate of the background there, so you can see it right there. Actually, I'm going to even do one thing differently. Is let's make another copy here, and I'm going to add a mask on there, okay? So right now, the only thing I can see on this is the white part. So I'm comparing a blur. Let's do surface blur. I'm on the mask. Apologize. I'll go right here. I selected the image because that's what I wanted to really blur. Let's do lens blur. Let's just go with that. Now you see the background is blurry, not her. And back it off a little bit. And just make it slightly softer, right? And then I can go in here and clean up those edges if that's what I wanted to do. Alright, so let's leave that alone for a minute, and then we're going to give you a little bonus thing. You see how her skin is different colors here? Let's talk about portrait retouching real quick. So the couple things I would do is I'd say, even though this is probably intentional with these red rosy cheeks, just imagine it being a sunburn, okay? So we're going to come in here and make a blank layer. This is something you guys learned early on. We're going to grab a paintbrush tool, and we're going to paint this red out. So we're going to change this blend mode to color, because what we're saying is we only want the color to be transferred through to the layer below it. And how do we get this color off her cheek? You remember we had two ways. We come over here and use the color picker tool and click it, and now it shows it. But if I'm in the paintbrush tool, this is going to be a lot easier for me. Is I'm going to hold down the Alt key and watch it turn into a dropper. Click it. Now I'm just going to paint right here. And that's probably a little harsh. Let me back up one. I'm going to lower my opacity down to maybe half-ish. It's also a hard brush. I don't want a hard brush. So choose that color. I'm going to choose this color right here. I'm just going to even out the color of her face all the way across. Maybe even her chest there is a little bit darker than I want it. As far as redness, just choose that color and bring it up here. You see I accidentally bleeded into her hair a little bit there, so let's just grab the eraser tool and get rid of that. Alright, so let's see before and after. See all that rosiness in her cheeks right there? But imagine if that was like a sunburn or something you're trying to even out a person's skin tone. The other thing that I want to show you is a cool trick. And it's more for smoothing skin. She's got pretty smooth skin already. But let's just pretend like some of these lines right here. So what we would want to do is we can make a new layer. Take a brush. Lower the opacity to about 10%, somewhere in there. Have a soft brush, and then I want to select a color, and I'm just painting directly on it. So I can smooth out this area in her chest here. You know, those are more freckles and low resolution here. I could smooth out wrinkles under eyes. I could get rid of shiny spots. The different thing about this is I'm actually painting right on the image. Check this out, before, after. You know, you don't really see it till the end, so that's with the painting, that's without. So probably that's a little strong, and I'm going to back it off a little bit. But as far as defeaturing somebody's wrinkles and different things, it's a lot better than trying to blur the whole image and trying to add some sort of artificial skin softening. I like that one a lot better, and that one's a freebie there. And I told people I would talk about teeth whitening. Her teeth are pretty white here, but the way I would do teeth whitening is I'd make a layer. I would turn it white. I'd come in here and I would paint just the teeth. And note, I could have came down here. Let me grab this image here. And you know we've been talking about selections. I could have probably grabbed a quick selection tool and just grabbed her teeth, right? And I'm going to hold down Alt to get rid of her lips. And you remember how we can do a fill layer. We have our selection. I'm going to press Alt backspace. It's going to fill that in white. I could come in here and delete these. I could have just easily painted it. Okay, I'm going to lower this opacity some. I could then change this blend mode to color, which makes them gray, as some people have mentioned. And why does it make them gray? Is because it's really just it's taking the saturation out. It's actually just white, but it's the tone of it's a little bit gray. So I would do that, and then I'd lower that opacity a little bit because you're trying to get rid of any color cast, especially if they're like yellow teeth. Then I would make a copy of that layer because I've already got my selection. I would change it to soft light, and that's going to brighten it. And then I'd back that off a little bit too. So let's see how her teeth were before. You know, those are a lot wider on her teeth, but they really didn't need anything. In fact, I don't think they look good because they're too white now. So it can be too white. And if you think the color is still taking too much out of it, then you could back it off a little bit more. Right, so I've got my selection, so you can tell because I can click Control on my layer and I can see my selection. Alright, so that's about it for a quick selection or tutorial on selections. Let's go to the history here for a minute and we can see our before and our after. One more time. You know, these are things I probably wouldn't normally do in an image anyways, just to demonstrate selections. So go ahead and tinker around with those and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.